You know, there's something quite funny about this whole spiritual business. People come to me and say, Alan, I've been meditating, I've read all the right books. I've had this extraordinary experience of oneness with everything. And then, almost in the same breath, they add, but why do I feel so terribly lonely? Why can't I find someone to love? And I look at them and I want to laugh, not because I'm mocking their pain, you understand? But because they don't see the cosmic joke they've walked into. They've awakened to the fact that they're the entire universe expressing itself. And now they're complaining that they can't get a date on Saturday night. It's like a wave that suddenly realizes it's the ocean and then worries because it can't find another wave with which to have a stable relationship. But let me tell you something. This loneliness, this feeling of being set apart from the ordinary games of romance, is not a bug in the system. It's a feature. And once you understand why, you'll see that what looks like a problem is actually the opening of a door to something far more interesting than anything you've left behind. So let's talk about love, real love, and why those who awaken find the old game absolutely impossible to play. The first thing you need to understand is that what most people call love is nothing of the sort. It's a transaction, a bartering system, two hungry ghosts making arrangements in the dark. You see, we've all been taught a very peculiar story about love. We're taught that somewhere out there is the other half of ourselves, that we're incomplete, broken, insufficient. If we could only find that special person, that missing piece, we'd finally be whole. Look what a marvelous piece of fiction that is. And like all good fiction, millions believe it without question. So we go through life searching for completion. We fix ourselves up, we learn the right words to say. We practice our smiles in the mirror, and all the while we're terrified, absolutely terrified that no one will choose us, that we'll be left on the shelf like unwanted merchandise. So this is what passes for romance in our world. Two people, each convinced of their own incompleteness, each desperately hoping the other will fill the void. For a while it works. The intoxication, the fever, the sleepless nights, the constant thinking about the other person. We call this falling in love. But notice the word falling, as if love were a pit you stumble into, as if it were something that happens to you rather than something you do. And what fuels this falling? It's not love, my friends. It's not love at all, but raw, desperate need. The need to escape the horror of being alone with ourselves. The need to prove that we matter, that we exist, that someone finds us worthy of attention. It's all very romantic on the surface. The love letters, the declarations, the dramatic gestures. But underneath, it's just two people using each other as life rafts in what they imagine is a drowning. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When you wake up, even just a little bit, you begin to see through this game. You start to notice that what you called love was mostly fear dressed up in a prettier suit. You see how much of your passion was really just anxiety about being alone? How much of your devotion was really just negotiation? I'll be what you want if you'll be what I want. I'll soothe your terror if you soothe mine. And once you see this, once you really see it, you can't unsee it. It's like watching a magic trick after someone has explained how it's done. Oh, you can still appreciate the skill involved. You can admire the performance, but it no longer fools you. The rabbit was in the hat all along. This is why the awakened find it so hard to fall in love the conventional way. Not because they become cold or insensitive, quite the opposite, but because they can no longer participate in the mutual hypnosis that passes for romance. They've seen the wires holding up the stage. They know the love songs are singing about need dressed up in moonlight. They recognize the whole drama for what it is. A beautiful, tragic game that two incomplete people play to avoid facing their own emptiness. But here's the thing. When you wake up, you discover something extraordinary. You're not empty at all. That emptiness you were so afraid of, that terrible loneliness you were trying to escape from, was never real. It was a story you told yourself. A story so convincing you organize your entire life around avoiding it. The truth is you're not half a person waiting to be completed. You're not a fragment of something that broke at birth. You are the whole. You are the universe experiencing itself through this particular pattern called you. You're as complete right now as you will ever be. The idea that you need someone else to make you whole is like a wave thinking it needs another wave to become water. It already is water. It always was water. And when you truly understand this, when you feel in your bones, something shifts. The desperate hunger that drove you toward others begins to settle. You stop scanning every room for potential saviors. You stop measuring every interaction by whether it might lead to the completion you seek, because you're no longer seeking completion. You're already complete. Now, this sounds wonderful in theory, and in many ways it is. There's tremendous freedom in not needing others to validate your existence. But there's also a price, and the price is this: you can no longer play the old game. You can no longer pretend that the theatrical performances of conventional romance are real. You can't fake being swept away when you see too clearly how the sweeping is produced. This is where the loneliness comes in, not the loneliness of being physically alone. That's easy. You can sit alone for hours and feel perfectly content. No, this is a different loneliness. It's the loneliness of seeing through a game that everyone else is still playing. It's like being the only adult at a children's party. The kids are having a wonderful time, and so you hesitate, not from fear, but from clarity. You can't walk into a trap when you see it so clearly. You can't drink the poison when you know what's in the cup. And this hesitation, this inability to throw yourself into the old drama, sets you apart. Others sense it. They feel that you're not playing by the usual rules. And it makes them uncomfortable or makes them curious. But either way, it creates distance. Here's what no one tells you about awakening. It raises the standard. Before, you might have been content with someone who made you laugh, someone who found you attractive, someone who filled the evenings with conversation. But now that's not enough. You're looking for something more, something that has no name in the usual vocabulary of romance. You're looking for someone who has also seen through the game, someone who knows they're already complete, someone who isn't trying to use you as a missing piece in their puzzle, because only then can you meet each other as you truly are. Not as fantasies or saviors or solutions to loneliness, but as two expressions of the same reality. Two waves who have both realized their ocean. And here's the difficulty. Such people are rare, extraordinarily rare. Most people are still caught in the old story. They're still looking for their other half. They're still trying to build their identity through relationships. They're still playing the game with deadly seriousness. And you can't blame them for this. You played it too until you didn't, until you saw through it. But the fact is the field has narrowed considerably where once there were many possibilities. Now there are few options. Where once you might have fallen in love with someone's smile, with their wit, or their way of moving through the world, now you need something more. You need them to be awake, or at least awakening. You need them to know what you know, to see what you see, and that severely limits the options. This is why so many spiritually awakened people find themselves alone, not because they cannot love, but because they can no longer love in the old way. They've outgrown it, like a child who has learned to read and can no longer find satisfaction in picture books. The old stories no longer work. They need something more substantial, something real. And sometimes, in fact often, that something real doesn't show up. Years pass. You meet people, you have conversations, you feel connections, but none of them are deep enough. None touch the place where you actually live. And so you remain alone, not with bitterness, not with desperation, but in a kind of patient waiting. Waiting for someone who speaks your language, who breathes the same air, who has traveled to the same country you've gone to and knows its geography. There's a certain dignity in this loneliness, a kind of integrity. You're not willing to settle for less than truth. You're not willing to go back to sleep just because sleeping is more comfortable. You'd rather remain in clarity, even if it means being alone, than bowed down in illusion accompanied. But let's be honest, it's not always easy. There are nights when the silence feels heavy, when you wonder if you've made a terrible mistake. When you look at people in their ordinary relationships with all their ordinary dramas and compromises, and you think maybe that would be easier. Maybe you're asking for too much. Maybe this clarity you've gained has cost you something precious. And you'd be right. It has cost you something. It has cost you the ability to be satisfied with illusion. It has cost you the option of using another person to avoid yourself. It has cost you the comfort of not knowing what you know. These are real costs, and sometimes they seem too high. But here's what you need to understand. You can't go back, even if you wanted to. Even if you try to play the old game, pretend you don't see what you see, it wouldn't work. The awakening has happened. You've tasted something real, and once you've tasted the authentic, the counterfeit loses all its flavor. So what do? You wait. You live. You continue growing, learning, and experiencing the richness of existence. You don't close your heart. You don't become bitter or cynical. You simply recognize that love, true love, must come from a different place. Now, not from need, but from fullness. Not from fear, but from freedom. Not from the desperate clutching of two incomplete people, but from the joyful meeting of two whole beings. And perhaps it will come. Perhaps one day you'll meet someone who has walked the same path, who carries the same quality of presence, who looks at you and doesn't see a solution to their loneliness, but a companion in the mystery. Someone who doesn't need you to complete them because they're already complete. Someone who can love you, not because they must, but because they choose to. Because love itself is the point, not what they get from it. When that happens, if it happens, it's nothing like the old falling in love. There's no fever, no obsession, no desperate attachment. Instead, there's a recognition, a meeting of equals. Two people who are already at peace with themselves, choosing to share that peace with one another. Not because they need to, but because they want to, because it's delightful, because it's an expression of the freedom each has discovered within themselves. This kind of love doesn't bind, doesn't possess, doesn't make demands. It simply is, like water flowing, like birds flying, like the sun shining. It's love without agenda, without negotiation, without the subtle bargaining that underlies so much of what passes for love in this world. But again, such love is rare, and there's no guarantee you'll find it. You might spend your whole life waiting. You might die without ever having known another awakened being in the intimate way you long for. And you must make peace with that possibility. You must be willing to walk alone if that's what clarity requires, because the alternative is worse. The alternative is to go back to sleep, to squeeze back into the old costume and play the old role, to use someone or let someone use you in the mutual pretense that this will solve the problem of existence. And you can no longer, the costume doesn't fit, the role doesn't convince. You've seen behind the curtain, and there's no way to put the veil back on. So you carry this strange gift, this burden of clarity. You're awake in a world that mostly sleeps. You see through games that everyone else takes seriously. And yes, it's lonely sometimes. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, you wish it were easier to find someone who understands, but you wouldn't change it because you've tasted freedom, and freedom, true freedom, is worth any price. The spiritually awakened cannot find love, not because love has abandoned them, but because they refuse to call anything less than truth love. They've stopped confusing need with love, hunger with passion, dependence with devotion. They've stopped playing the game where two people use each other as an escape from themselves, and in stopping, they've opened themselves to something far more real, something that may never come, or may come tomorrow, or may already be here in ways they haven't yet learned to recognize. But whatever happens, they know this. They're already complete, they're already whole, they're already free. And that knowledge, that certainty, is more valuable than all the false romances in the world. They'd rather be alone in truth than coupled in illusion. They'd rather wait a lifetime for something real than settle for something that simply fills the time. This is the price of awakening. It's also its gift. You lose the ability to lose yourself in others, but you gain the ability to find yourself in everything. You lose the comfort of mutual need, but you gain the freedom of not needing it all. You lose the old story of romance, but you open yourself to the possibility of something much larger. Love without conditions, love without demands. Love that asks nothing and gives everything. Love that's not a feeling or an emotion, but a way of being in the world. And if you never find another person to share that with, you still have love itself, because it was never in the other person anyway. It was always in you, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be lived, not as a transaction between two people, but as the ground of your own being, as what you are, not what you do, as the ocean, not the wave. This is why the spiritually awakened cannot find love the usual way, because they've already found it in the most important way. They found it in themselves, and nothing, no person, no relationship, no romance, however sweet, can compare to that discovery. Everything else is just play, delightful perhaps, beautiful sometimes, but plain nonetheless. And you can enjoy the play without confusing it with the real, without betting your piece on its outcome, without forgetting who you are beneath all the costumes and roles. So yes, you're alone sometimes. Yes, the crowd has thinned. Yes, it's harder to find someone who speaks your language, but you're also free in a way you never were before. Free to love without needing. Free to connect without clinging. Free to be yourself without apology or pretense. And that freedom, that vast and spacious freedom, is what you've been looking for all along. Not in another person, but in yourself, where it always was, where it will always be, waiting for you to come home.